Question 1. The risk matrix shows a potential for misinterpretation of terms related to attorney supervision and paralegal autonomy, which are critical for TBLS paralegal certification. Which of the following best reflects the accurate understanding and application of these terms within the Texas regulatory framework for paralegals? Option A. Understanding that direct supervision by an attorney, as required by TBLS, means the attorney must be readily available to the paralegal and must review and approve the paralegal's work product before it is filed or communicated to a client, ensuring the paralegal acts only under the attorney's explicit instructions. Option B. Believing that paralegal autonomy permits the paralegal to provide legal advice to clients directly, as long as the advice is based on general legal principles and not specific to the client's unique circumstances, thereby reducing the attorney's workload. Option C. Equating independent legal judgment for a paralegal with the ability to make final decisions on legal matters, including settlement offers or court appearances, without any requirement for attorney review or approval, as this demonstrates advanced competency. Option D. Interpreting attorney supervision broadly to encompass any form of guidance or consultation, allowing the paralegal significant latitude in independently determining case strategy and client communication without constant attorney oversight, as long as the final outcome is satisfactory. Correct answer is A. Understanding that direct supervision by an attorney, as required by TBLS, means the attorney must be readily available to the paralegal and must review and approve the paralegal's work product before it is filed or communicated to a client, ensuring the paralegal acts only under the attorney's explicit instructions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal must accurately interpret and apply complex legal terminology within the specific regulatory framework of the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, paralegal certification. Misunderstanding or misusing these terms can lead to incorrect advice, procedural errors, and ultimately, a failure to meet the certification requirements. The paralegal's role demands precision and adherence to established legal language. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the specific legal terms as defined and used within the TBLS framework, particularly as they relate to the certification process and the practice of law in Texas. This means consulting official TBLS guidelines, Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct, and relevant Texas statutes. The paralegal must demonstrate an ability to distinguish between similar-sounding but legally distinct terms, ensuring their application aligns with the precise meaning intended by the TBLS for certification purposes. This meticulous attention to detail is paramount for demonstrating competence and upholding professional standards as expected by the TBLS. An incorrect approach would be to rely on general legal dictionaries or common usage, without verifying the specific meaning within the Texas legal context and TBLS requirements. This could lead to misinterpretations of terms like supervision versus direction, or independent legal judgment versus delegated tasks, which are critical distinctions for paralegal certification. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that terms used in other jurisdictions or in academic settings have the same meaning and application under TBLS rules. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of jurisdictional specificity and the importance of adhering to the governing regulations for certification. Failing to consult the official TBLS resources or relevant Texas statutes and rules would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure, as it indicates a disregard for the authoritative sources of legal definitions and requirements. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should begin with identifying the specific legal term in question and its context. Next, the professional must consult the most authoritative sources for that jurisdiction and certification body, in this case, TBLS official publications, Texas statutes, and Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and Professional Conduct. If ambiguity persists, seeking clarification from a supervising attorney or directly from the TBLS would be the appropriate next step. This systematic approach ensures accuracy, compliance, and professional integrity. Question 2. Research into best practices for paralegal communication reveals a scenario where a client urgently contacts their attorney regarding a time-sensitive legal matter, and opposing counsel has just sent a demanding email requesting specific documents by the end of the day. The attorney is unexpectedly out of the office for the remainder of the day with no immediate access to email or phone. As the paralegal assigned to the case, what is the most appropriate course of action to effectively manage communication and protect the client's interests? Option A. Contact opposing counsel and agree to provide the requested documents by the end of the day without consulting the attorney. Option B. Ignore both the client's urgent request and the opposing counsel's email until the attorney returns to the office. Option C. Advise the client on how to interpret the opposing counsel's request and suggest potential legal arguments they could make. Option D. Inform the client that the attorney is unavailable, but will review the matter upon their return and propose a reasonable extension to opposing counsel for the requested documents, explaining the attorney's absence. The correct answer is D. Inform the client that the attorney is unavailable, but will review the matter upon their return and propose a reasonable extension to opposing counsel for the requested documents, explaining the attorney's absence. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between a paralegal's duty to communicate effectively and the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality and avoid unauthorized practice of law. A paralegal must provide clear, accurate, and timely information to clients and opposing counsel while respecting the boundaries of their role. Miscommunication can lead to misunderstandings, missed deadlines, and potential ethical violations. Careful judgment is required to navigate these complexities. The correct approach involves a paralegal proactively and clearly communicating the attorney's unavailability and the next steps for addressing the client's urgent request. This demonstrates professionalism, manages client expectations, and upholds the attorney-client relationship. Specifically, the paralegal should inform the client that the attorney is unavailable, but will review the matter upon their return and provide a timeframe for that review. Simultaneously, the paralegal should inform opposing counsel of the attorney's unavailability and propose a reasonable extension for the requested information, thereby protecting the client's interests and maintaining professional courtesy. This approach aligns with the TBLS paralegal certification's emphasis on effective communication and ethical conduct, ensuring that client needs are addressed promptly and appropriately within the paralegal's scope of practice, and in compliance with rules governing attorney-paralegal relationships and communication with opposing counsel. An incorrect approach would be to provide legal advice to the client regarding the opposing counsel's request. This constitutes the unauthorized practice of law, a serious ethical violation for a paralegal. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the client's urgent request or the opposing counsel's deadline, which would demonstrate a failure in communication and potentially prejudice the client's case, leading to disciplinary action. Finally, a paralegal should not promise a specific outcome or legal strategy to the client, as this is the exclusive purview of the attorney and could create unrealistic expectations or misrepresent the attorney's position. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Assessing the urgency and nature of the communication. 2. Identifying the appropriate party to respond, attorney vs. paralegal. 3. Determining the paralegal's scope of authority and ethical limitations. 4. Communicating clearly and professionally with all relevant parties, managing expectations and proposing solutions within ethical boundaries. And 5. Documenting all communications. Question 3. To address the challenge of implementing a new, complex e-discovery platform in a busy litigation practice without prior formal training, what is the most professionally responsible course of action for a TBLS certified paralegal? Option A. Proactively seek comprehensive training on the e-discovery platform and collaborate with the supervising attorney to establish clear, documented procedures for its use in ongoing cases. Option B. Rely on informal guidance from colleagues and online tutorials to understand the platform's features and implement it as needed. Option C. Attempt to learn the platform's functionalities through hands-on experimentation while actively managing active discovery matters. Option D. Express reluctance to use the new technology until a more formal and extensive training program is provided by the vendor. The correct answer is A. Proactively seek comprehensive training on the e-discovery platform and collaborate with the supervising attorney to establish clear, documented procedures for its use in ongoing cases. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the paralegal is tasked with implementing new litigation support technology without adequate training or clear procedural guidelines. This lack of preparation creates a significant risk of errors, data breaches, and inefficient workflow, which can negatively impact client representation and violate ethical obligations. Careful judgment is required to navigate the technical and procedural hurdles while ensuring compliance with TBLS standards and ethical rules governing paralegal practice in Texas. The correct approach involves proactively seeking comprehensive training on the new software and collaborating with the supervising attorney to develop clear, documented procedures for its use. This demonstrates a commitment to professional competence and diligence, as required by ethical rules. By ensuring proper training and established protocols, the paralegal minimizes the risk of errors, protects client confidentiality, and ensures the technology is used effectively to support the litigation process. This proactive stance aligns with the TBLS certification's emphasis on practical skills and ethical conduct. An incorrect approach would be to attempt to learn the software through trial and error while actively using it in active cases. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly jeopardizes client confidentiality and the integrity of case data. It also fails to meet the standard of diligence expected of a certified paralegal, potentially leading to significant errors in document management or discovery production. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal advice from colleagues or online forums without formal training or attorney approval. While informal learning can be supplementary, it does not substitute for structured education and established firm procedures. This approach risks misinterpreting functionalities, overlooking critical security features, or implementing workflows that are not compliant with firm policies or ethical mandates, thereby compromising client interests. Finally, an incorrect approach is to delay implementation or avoid using the new technology altogether due to a lack of confidence. This inaction can hinder the firm's efficiency, put the paralegal at a disadvantage in terms of skill development, and potentially lead to missed opportunities for effective case management. It fails to meet the professional obligation to adapt to evolving technological tools that enhance legal services. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of new technologies. This includes identifying training needs, understanding the technology's implications for client data and confidentiality, seeking clear guidance from supervising attorneys, and developing standardized procedures before full implementation. A commitment to continuous learning and adherence to ethical guidelines are paramount. Question 4. Analysis of a scenario where a paralegal is tasked with assisting in the transfer of a residential property in Texas. The client provides an executed deed conveying the property to a new owner. The paralegal notes the deed appears to be correctly drafted and signed. However, the paralegal also recalls seeing a mortgage document for the property in the client's file from a previous transaction, and a preliminary title search indicates an outstanding judgment lien against the property. What is the most appropriate course of action for the paralegal to ensure the transfer is handled correctly under Texas law and ethical guidelines? Option A. Thoroughly review the deed and all lien documents. Research Texas law regarding the effect of liens on property transfers and the process for clearing title, and report all findings and potential issues to the supervising attorney. Option B. Draft a new deed that explicitly states the property is being transferred subject to all existing liens. Option C. Proceed with filing the deed, assuming the attorney will address any title issues later. Option D. Advise the client that the existing mortgage and judgment lien prevent any transfer of ownership. The correct answer is C. Proceed with filing the deed, assuming the attorney will address any title issues later. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in real property law where a paralegal must accurately identify and document the transfer of ownership while navigating potential encumbrances. The challenge lies in ensuring the paralegal's actions align with Texas statutory requirements for property conveyance and the ethical obligations of diligence and competence. A paralegal must not only understand the mechanics of a deed, but also recognize the implications of existing liens and their impact on clear title. The correct approach involves a thorough review of all relevant documents, including the executed deed and any existing lien documents, to ensure the deed accurately reflects the intended transfer and that the paralegal understands the status of any encumbrances. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the paralegal's duty to assist in the accurate and lawful transfer of real property. Specifically, Texas Property Code provisions governing conveyances and the recording of instruments are paramount. A paralegal's role is to facilitate the process under attorney supervision, which necessitates a precise understanding of the legal effect of the deed and any associated liens. Failure to identify and properly address liens could lead to title defects, disputes, and potential liability for the client and the supervising attorney. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the execution of the deed without investigating the status of existing mortgages or liens. This is ethically flawed because it demonstrates a lack of diligence and competence, violating the paralegal's duty to provide thorough support. Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct, while directly applicable to attorneys, inform the ethical standards expected of paralegals working under their supervision. A paralegal must be aware of the potential for liens to cloud title and impact the transfer. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that the existence of a lien automatically prevents transfer. While liens do encumber property, they do not inherently halt a sale or transfer. Rather, they must be addressed, often through payoff or assumption, as part of the transaction. A paralegal's role is to identify these issues for the attorney's review, not to make assumptions about their impact on the transfer's validity without proper investigation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations requires a systematic approach. First, identify the core legal task, property transfer. Second, determine the relevant Texas statutes and case law governing that task, e.g., Texas Property Code regarding deeds and conveyances. Third, identify potential complications or encumbrances, liens, mortgages. Fourth, gather all necessary documentation. Fifth, analyze the documentation in light of the relevant law, identifying any discrepancies or issues. Finally, report findings and potential issues to the supervising attorney for legal advice and action. This structured process ensures both legal compliance and ethical practice. Question 5. The investigation demonstrates that a client is seeking to understand the implications of a new policy announced by a federal agency that appears to impact a business operating under Texas state regulations. The policy, as described in a press release, seems to create new compliance obligations. The paralegal is asked to determine the validity and enforceability of this new policy under both federal and Texas law. Option A. Focus solely on the Texas Administrative Procedure Act, assuming that any federal policy impacting a Texas business must first be adopted by a Texas state agency to be enforceable. Option B. Immediately advise the client that the federal agency's press release constitutes a binding regulation and that compliance is mandatory under federal law, without further research into Texas law or the rulemaking process. Option C. Research the Federal Administrative Procedure Act and the relevant federal agency's regulations to determine if the policy was issued through a formal rulemaking process, and then research the Texas Administrative Procedure Act and any relevant Texas agency regulations to ascertain if the federal policy preempts or conflicts with state law. Option D. Draft a legal memorandum for the client outlining the potential legal challenges to the federal policy based on the paralegal's personal interpretation of administrative law principles, without consulting the supervising attorney. The correct answer is C. Research the Federal Administrative Procedure Act and the relevant federal agency's regulations to determine if the policy was issued through a formal rulemaking process, and then research the Texas Administrative Procedure Act and any relevant Texas agency regulations to ascertain if the federal policy preempts or conflicts with state law. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal must navigate the complex interplay between state and federal administrative law, specifically concerning rulemaking and the potential for conflicting agency interpretations. The paralegal's duty is to provide accurate and ethically sound advice, which requires a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory frameworks and the paralegal's scope of practice. Misinterpreting agency rules or failing to identify the correct governing jurisdiction can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions for the attorney and the client. The correct approach involves meticulously researching both federal and Texas state administrative law, identifying the specific agency responsible for the regulation in question, and determining whether the agency's action is a formal rulemaking process or an interpretive guidance. This requires consulting the Texas Administrative Procedure Act, APA, and the Federal Administrative Procedure Act, APA, as well as the specific rules and regulations promulgated by the relevant agency. The paralegal must then analyze whether the agency's interpretation aligns with the statutory authority granted to the agency, and whether it follows the prescribed rulemaking procedures. This approach is correct because it adheres to the TBLS certification standards, which emphasize a deep understanding of legal principles and their application within the specified jurisdiction. It also aligns with ethical obligations to provide competent representation by ensuring all legal avenues and regulatory requirements are thoroughly investigated. An incorrect approach would be to solely rely on the federal APA without considering the Texas APA. This is a regulatory failure because Texas has its own distinct administrative law framework, including specific notice and comment periods, filing requirements, and judicial review provisions that may differ from federal law. Another incorrect approach would be to assume the agency's published interpretation is automatically valid without verifying if it was promulgated through the proper rulemaking process. This is an ethical failure, as it could lead to advising the client based on an invalid or improperly enacted rule, potentially violating the duty of competence. A further incorrect approach would be to provide a definitive legal opinion on the validity of the rule without the direct supervision of the attorney. Paralegals are prohibited from practicing law, and offering such opinions falls outside their authorized scope of work, constituting a serious ethical breach. Professional decision-making in similar situations requires a systematic approach. First, identify the core legal issue. Second, determine the governing jurisdiction. Third, research all applicable statutes, regulations, and case law. Fourth, consult with the supervising attorney for guidance on complex legal interpretations and the scope of paralegal duties. And fifth, document all research and findings meticulously. Question 6. During the evaluation of a newly filed pleading in a Texas civil case, a paralegal notes that the opposing counsel has filed a document titled Motion to Dismiss for Lack of Jurisdiction. The paralegal recalls that the deadline for the defendant to file an answer is approaching. The paralegal is unsure whether to prepare a response to the motion or to focus on ensuring the answer is timely filed, considering the potential overlap in procedural rules. Option A. Prepare a response to the motion as if it were a motion for summary judgment, focusing on presenting evidence to counter the merits of the plaintiff's claims, as all pre-answer motions are generally treated similarly. Option B. Focus solely on preparing the defendant's answer to the plaintiff's petition, assuming that the motion to dismiss is a procedural formality that will be addressed after the substantive pleadings are filed. Option C. Advise the supervising attorney that the motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction must be addressed before the deadline for filing an answer, as it challenges the court's fundamental authority and typically abates the obligation to answer until it is resolved. Option D. Advise the supervising attorney to disregard the motion to dismiss and proceed with filing the answer by the original deadline, as the motion does not alter the defendant's obligation to respond to the lawsuit. The correct answer is C. Advise the supervising attorney that the motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction must be addressed before the deadline for filing an answer, as it challenges the court's fundamental authority and typically abates the obligation to answer until it is resolved. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in civil litigation, where a paralegal must accurately assess the procedural posture of a case to ensure compliance with the Texas rules of civil procedure. The difficulty lies in distinguishing between a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction and a motion for summary judgment, as each has distinct procedural implications, deadlines, and evidentiary standards. Misinterpreting these distinctions can lead to significant strategic errors, missed deadlines, and potential sanctions. The correct approach involves recognizing that a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction, as contemplated by Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 128, challenges the court's fundamental power to hear the case, often based on issues like service of process or the nature of the claim. In contrast, a motion for summary judgment, governed by Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 166A, seeks to resolve the case on its merits by asserting that there are no genuine issues of material fact and that the moving party is entitled to judgment as a matter of law. The paralegal's duty is to identify the specific rule invoked and the relief sought to determine the appropriate response and deadlines. An incorrect approach would be to treat a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction as if it were a motion for summary judgment. This failure to differentiate between the two types of motion is a direct violation of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure. Specifically, it ignores the distinct procedural pathways and requirements for each. A motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction typically requires a response within a shorter time frame and focuses on procedural defects, not the merits of the case. Responding as if it were a summary judgment motion, which allows for more extensive discovery and briefing on the merits, would be procedurally improper and could result in the dismissal of the jurisdictional challenge without adequate consideration, or conversely, an unnecessary expenditure of resources on a motion that is not properly before the court. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that all motions filed before an answer are automatically motions to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. While many such motions are, some can be motions for summary judgment filed early in the case, particularly if the moving party believes the pleadings themselves demonstrate a lack of merit or a dispositive issue. This assumption overlooks the possibility of early dispositive motions and the need to carefully review the substance of the motion. A third incorrect approach would be to focus solely on the deadline for filing an answer without considering the impact of the pending motion. Under Texas Rule of Civil Procedure 124, a defendant must file an answer on or before the Monday next after the expiration of 20 days after the date the citation was served. However, the filing of certain motions, including a motion to dismiss, can have the effect of abating the deadline for filing an answer until the motion is ruled upon. Failing to recognize this interaction between the motion and the answer deadline is a procedural misstep. The professional decision-making process for similar situations requires a meticulous review of the motion's title, the specific rule cited, and the relief requested. The paralegal must then consult the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure to understand the procedural requirements, response deadlines, and potential impact of the motion on the case's progression. If there is any ambiguity, the paralegal should seek clarification from the supervising attorney before taking any action. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that clients often seek legal recourse for defective product claims. A paralegal is tasked with assisting an attorney in investigating a potential product liability lawsuit. The paralegal has identified several potential witnesses, including the injured consumer, eyewitnesses to the product's failure, and a former employee of the manufacturing company. The paralegal has also located physical evidence of the defective product and related maintenance records. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the paralegal's role in the pre-suit investigation phase under the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, Paralegal Certification Framework, and the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure? Option A. The paralegal should immediately contact the former employee of the manufacturing company to solicit a sworn affidavit detailing the product's known defects, and then independently draft a demand letter to the manufacturer based on the gathered information. Option B. The paralegal should organize all collected factual information, including witness contact details, interview notes taken under attorney supervision, and copies of relevant documents, and present this comprehensive package to the supervising attorney for strategic planning and further action. Option C. Paralegal should instruct the injured consumer to dispose of the defective product to prevent further damage or potential tampering by the opposing party, and then proceed to file a petition with the court without further investigation. Option D. The paralegal should contact the manufacturing company's legal department directly to inform them of the impending lawsuit and to request immediate settlement discussions, bypassing the supervising attorney's involvement. The correct answer is A. The paralegal should immediately contact the former employee of the manufacturing company to solicit a sworn affidavit detailing the product's known defects, and then independently draft a demand letter to the manufacturer based on the gathered information. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal must navigate the critical pre-suit investigation phase while adhering strictly to the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, Paralegal Certification Guidelines. The paralegal's actions directly impact the foundation of the potential lawsuit, influencing the attorney's ability to gather admissible evidence and formulate effective pleadings. Missteps at this stage can lead to the exclusion of crucial evidence, the filing of inadequate pleadings, and ultimately, prejudice to the client's case. The paralegal must exercise sound professional judgment to ensure all investigative steps are legally permissible and ethically sound, anticipating potential evidentiary challenges and procedural requirements. The correct approach involves the paralegal diligently gathering all relevant factual information, identifying potential witnesses, and collecting documents that support the client's claims. This includes conducting thorough background checks, interviewing witnesses under attorney supervision, and preserving physical evidence. The paralegal must then organize this information in a clear and concise manner for the supervising attorney, highlighting any potential legal issues or evidentiary hurdles. This aligns with the TBLS certification's emphasis on a paralegal's role in assisting attorneys with case preparation, ensuring that all pre-suit activities are conducted in a manner that complies with the Texas rules of civil procedure, particularly those pertaining to the admissibility of evidence and the foundational elements of a cause of action. The paralegal's role is to support the attorney's strategic decisions by providing a comprehensive and well-organized factual basis for the lawsuit. An incorrect approach would be for the paralegal to independently contact opposing parties or their counsel to negotiate a settlement or discuss the merits of the case before formal pleadings are filed. This violates ethical rules prohibiting unauthorized practice of law and can jeopardize attorney-client privilege. Another incorrect approach would be to destroy or alter any potentially unfavorable evidence discovered during the investigation, as this constitutes spoliation of evidence and carries severe legal and ethical consequences. Furthermore, failing to document the investigative steps taken and the information gathered would be professionally deficient, hindering the attorney's ability to build a strong case and potentially leading to procedural challenges later in litigation. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a constant awareness of the supervising attorney's directives, the applicable Texas rules of civil procedure, and ethical obligations. Paralegals must understand the scope of their authority and when to seek attorney guidance. A systematic approach to information gathering, meticulous record keeping, and a proactive understanding of potential legal and evidentiary issues are paramount. When in doubt, the paralegal should always err on the side of caution and consult with the attorney. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a paralegal to meticulously analyze case law and identify legal issues. In the midst of preparing a complex litigation brief, a paralegal discovers a critical piece of evidence in the opposing party's discovery responses that appears to be directly exculpatory for their client, yet it was not previously disclosed by opposing counsel. What is the paralegal's immediate and most ethically sound course of action? Option A. Contact opposing counsel directly to inquire about the undisclosed evidence. Option B. Continue with the brief preparation, assuming the evidence was inadvertently omitted and will be produced later. Option C. Immediately inform the supervising attorney of the discovery and its potential significance. Option D. File a motion with the court to compel discovery of the evidence. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the supervising attorney of the discovery and its potential significance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a paralegal to navigate a potential ethical conflict involving client confidentiality and the duty to the court, all within the specific regulatory framework of the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, paralegal certification. The paralegal must analyze a case, identify legal issues, and apply legal principles, but the discovery of potentially exculpatory evidence that was not disclosed by opposing counsel creates a complex ethical dilemma. Careful judgment is required to balance the duty to the client with the overarching ethical obligations of the legal profession. The correct approach involves immediately and discreetly informing the supervising attorney about the discovery of the undisclosed evidence. This upholds the paralegal's duty of confidentiality to the client by not revealing the information to unauthorized parties. It also respects the attorney's ultimate responsibility for case strategy and ethical conduct. The supervising attorney can then ethically and legally determine the appropriate course of action, which might include filing a motion to compel discovery, seeking sanctions, or other legal remedies, all while adhering to the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct, particularly those concerning candor toward the tribunal and fairness to opposing party and counsel. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the undisclosed evidence. This failure to identify and report a significant legal issue and potential discovery violation would be a dereliction of the paralegal's duty to assist the attorney in providing competent representation and could prejudice the client's case. It also undermines the integrity of the discovery process and the court's reliance on accurate and complete information. Another incorrect approach would be to directly contact opposing counsel to demand the disclosure of the evidence. While the intent might be to rectify a discovery violation, this bypasses the supervising attorney, who is responsible for managing client communications and legal strategy. Such direct contact could create confusion, compromise the attorney's strategic position, and potentially violate ethical rules regarding communication with opposing parties or counsel. A third incorrect approach would be to disclose the existence of the undisclosed evidence to the court directly without consulting the supervising attorney. This would violate the paralegal's duty of loyalty and confidentiality to the client and the attorney. It also usurps the attorney's role in managing the case and communicating with the court, potentially leading to procedural errors and ethical breaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the paralegal's role as an assistant to the attorney. When a significant legal issue or potential ethical concern arises, the paralegal's primary responsibility is to promptly and accurately report the matter to their supervising attorney. This allows the attorney to exercise their professional judgment and take appropriate legal and ethical steps. Paralegals should be familiar with the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct and the TBLS certification requirements to understand their ethical boundaries and responsibilities. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that paralegals often face ethical quandaries when interacting with opposing counsel. Imagine you are a certified paralegal working on a complex Texas civil litigation matter. The opposing counsel emails you directly, requesting specific details about a settlement offer your firm has not yet formally presented to the client for review, and asks for your opinion on the client's willingness to negotiate further on certain terms. Your supervising attorney is currently out of the office and unreachable for the next 24 hours. What is the most ethically sound and professionally appropriate course of action? Option A. Politely decline to provide any substantive information or opinions, stating that all communications regarding settlement must be directed to your supervising attorney, and inform your supervising attorney of the communication as soon as they are available. Option B. Forward the email to your supervising attorney's personal email address, requesting an immediate response, and then wait for their reply before taking any action. Option C. Provide the requested details about the settlement offer and your assessment of the client's negotiation stance, noting that you are a paralegal and not an attorney. Option D. Respond to opposing counsel by stating that the client is unlikely to agree to further negotiation on those terms, based on your understanding of the case. The correct answer is A. Politely decline to provide any substantive information or opinions, stating that all communications regarding settlement must be directed to your supervising attorney, and inform your supervising attorney of the communication as soon as they are available. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the paralegal to navigate a conflict between a direct instruction from an attorney and a potential ethical obligation to ensure client confidentiality and avoid the unauthorized practice of law. The paralegal must exercise careful judgment to uphold ethical standards while respecting the attorney-client relationship and the hierarchy within a law firm. The correct approach involves the paralegal politely but firmly declining to provide the requested information directly to the opposing counsel, explaining that such communications must go through the supervising attorney. This approach is correct because it upholds the paralegal's ethical duty to avoid the unauthorized practice of law, as defined by the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct. Rule 13.01 prohibits a lawyer from assisting or facilitating the unauthorized practice of law. While not directly practicing law, a paralegal providing substantive legal information or engaging in direct settlement negotiations with opposing counsel without attorney supervision could be construed as facilitating such. Furthermore, it respects the attorney-client privilege and confidentiality by ensuring that all substantive communications are managed by the attorney responsible for the case. This approach also maintains professional boundaries and avoids potential misinterpretations or complications in the litigation. An incorrect approach would be to directly provide the requested information to opposing counsel. This is ethically problematic as it bypasses the supervising attorney and could be seen as engaging in substantive legal communication without proper authorization, potentially facilitating the unauthorized practice of law. It also risks breaching client confidentiality if the information shared is sensitive or if the paralegal misunderstands the scope of what can be disclosed. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request from opposing counsel. While this avoids direct ethical violations, it is professionally unhelpful and could create unnecessary friction or delays in the case. It fails to address the situation proactively and could lead to the opposing party taking further action, such as filing a motion to compel. A third incorrect approach would be to provide the information, but preface it with a disclaimer that the paralegal is not an attorney. While this attempts to mitigate the risk, it does not fully resolve the ethical concerns. The act of providing substantive legal information directly to opposing counsel, even with a disclaimer, can still be interpreted as engaging in conduct that facilitates the unauthorized practice of law or undermines the attorney's control over case strategy and communications. The proper channel for such communications is always through the supervising attorney. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the core ethical principles at play, e.g., unauthorized practice of law, confidentiality, professional boundaries. 2. Consulting the relevant Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct and any applicable paralegal guidelines. 3. Communicating directly and professionally with the supervising attorney to seek guidance and clarify instructions. 4. If direct communication with opposing counsel is unavoidable, ensuring all communications are strictly factual, non-substantive, and clearly state that the paralegal is acting under the direction of the supervising attorney. Question 10. Compliance review shows that a paralegal, assisting an attorney with a bankruptcy case, has been asked by the client about which chapter of bankruptcy, Chapter 7, Chapter 11, or Chapter 13, will be the best option for their financial situation. The paralegal has reviewed the client's income, debts, and assets, and has a strong understanding of the differences between the chapters. What is the paralegal's most appropriate course of action in this situation? Strictly adhering to the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, Paralegal Certification Framework, and relevant Texas ethical guidelines. Option A. Gather all client financial information and present it to the supervising attorney for the attorney's legal analysis and determination of the appropriate bankruptcy chapter. Option B. Tell the client they will definitely qualify for Chapter 13 bankruptcy based on the preliminary information gathered. Option C. Inform the client that Chapter 7 is generally the quickest and most straightforward option and suggest they consider it. Option D. Advise the client on the most suitable bankruptcy chapter based on their financial information and the paralegal's understanding of the law. The correct answer is D. Advise the client on the most suitable bankruptcy chapter based on their financial information and the paralegal's understanding of the law. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal, while assisting an attorney, must navigate the complexities of bankruptcy law and ensure that client communications and actions strictly adhere to the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, Paralegal Certification Standards, and the Texas Rules of Professional Conduct, particularly regarding unauthorized practice of law and client representation. The paralegal's role is to support the attorney, not to independently determine the most advantageous bankruptcy chapter for a client, which requires legal judgment and attorney-client privilege considerations. The correct approach involves the paralegal gathering all relevant financial information from the client and presenting it to the supervising attorney for the attorney's legal analysis and determination of the appropriate bankruptcy chapter. This aligns with TBLS certification expectations, which emphasize a paralegal's supportive role under attorney supervision. The Texas Rules of Professional Conduct, specifically Rule 5.05, Unauthorized Practice of Law, prohibit a paralegal from independently advising a client on legal matters or making legal decisions. By deferring the determination of the bankruptcy chapter to the attorney, the paralegal avoids engaging in the unauthorized practice of law and ensures the client receives competent legal advice from a licensed attorney. This approach respects the attorney-client relationship and upholds the ethical boundaries of paralegal practice. An incorrect approach would be for the paralegal to independently research and advise the client on whether Chapter 7, Chapter 11, or Chapter 13 bankruptcy is most suitable based on their understanding of the client's financial situation. This constitutes the unauthorized practice of law, violating Rule 5.05 of the Texas Rules of Professional Conduct. It bypasses the attorney's critical role in legal analysis and client counseling, potentially leading to incorrect advice and detrimental outcomes for the client. Furthermore, it undermines the attorney's responsibility for the overall representation. Another incorrect approach would be for the paralegal to suggest the client file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy simply because it is often the quickest and most straightforward option, without a thorough legal analysis by the attorney. This demonstrates a failure to appreciate the nuances of bankruptcy law and the attorney's duty to provide tailored legal advice. It also risks misrepresenting the client's options and potentially advising a course of action that is not in the client's best legal interest, again, bordering on the unauthorized practice of law. A third incorrect approach would be for the paralegal to tell the client that they will definitely qualify for Chapter 13 based on preliminary information. This is a definitive legal conclusion that only an attorney can make after a comprehensive review of the facts and applicable law. Such a statement creates a false sense of certainty for the client and is a clear instance of providing legal advice, which is outside the paralegal's scope of practice and violates ethical rules. The professional decision-making process for similar situations requires a paralegal to consistently recognize the boundaries of their role. When faced with a situation requiring legal judgment or advice, the paralegal's primary responsibility is to gather information and present it to the supervising attorney for their professional assessment and client communication. This involves understanding the specific ethical rules governing paralegals in Texas and prioritizing client welfare by ensuring all legal advice originates from a licensed attorney. Question 11. Investigation of a client's claim for breach of contract, where the potential damages are estimated to be $150,000, requires the paralegal to determine the appropriate Texas court for initiating the lawsuit. Which of the following actions best reflects the paralegal's responsibility in this jurisdictional matter? Option A. File the lawsuit in the Justice Court, as it handles a broad range of civil disputes and is the most accessible court for initial filings. Option B. File the lawsuit in the County Court, as it has general jurisdiction over civil matters and can accommodate claims of this magnitude. Option C. File the lawsuit in the Municipal Court, as it has jurisdiction over all civil matters filed within the city limits. Option D. File the lawsuit in the District Court, as it has original jurisdiction over civil cases involving significant monetary damages that do not fall under the exclusive jurisdiction of other courts. The correct answer is D. File the lawsuit in the District Court, as it has original jurisdiction over civil cases involving significant monetary damages that do not fall under the exclusive jurisdiction of other courts. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal must accurately identify the proper court for filing a lawsuit based on the nature of the claim and the amount in controversy, ensuring compliance with the Texas court system's jurisdictional rules. Misfiling can lead to significant delays, increased costs, and potential dismissal of the case, impacting the client's ability to seek redress. Careful judgment is required to navigate the distinctions between the various levels of Texas courts. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding of the Texas court system structure and the specific jurisdictional grants for each court. This includes recognizing that claims seeking monetary damages above a certain threshold and not falling under exclusive jurisdiction of other courts are generally filed in district courts. The paralegal must assess the nature of the dispute, e.g., contract dispute, personal injury, and the potential damages sought to determine the appropriate venue. This aligns with the paralegal's duty to assist attorneys in managing cases efficiently and effectively, adhering to procedural rules. An incorrect approach would be to file the lawsuit in a justice court or municipal court. Justice courts have limited jurisdiction, typically handling cases involving smaller monetary amounts, e.g., debt claims up to $20,000 and specific matters like evictions or minor traffic violations. Municipal courts primarily handle Class C misdemeanors and city ordinance violations. Filing a complex contract dispute seeking substantial damages in these courts would be a clear jurisdictional error, as these courts lack the authority to hear such cases. Another incorrect approach would be to file in a county court. County courts have broader jurisdiction than justice courts, but are generally subordinate to district courts for many types of civil litigation. While some county courts can hear civil cases up to a certain monetary limit, and others have appellate jurisdiction, a significant contract dispute with substantial damages would typically fall within the original jurisdiction of a district court. The professional reasoning process for a paralegal in this situation should involve 1. Ascertaining the precise nature of the legal claim and the relief sought, including any monetary damages. 2. Consulting relevant Texas statutes and rules of civil procedure that define the jurisdiction of Texas courts. 3. Identifying the specific court that possesses the proper subject matter jurisdiction and, if applicable, territorial jurisdiction. 4. Confirming the filing requirements and procedures for that identified court. This systematic approach ensures adherence to legal mandates and efficient case management. Question 12. The performance metrics show that the paralegal team is consistently meeting deadlines for case filings and discovery responses, but client satisfaction surveys indicate a growing concern regarding communication frequency and clarity of case updates. The supervising attorney has asked for a review of current client management practices to address this discrepancy. Which of the following approaches best optimizes client management processes while adhering to TBLS paralegal certification standards and relevant Texas ethical guidelines? Option A. Develop a system for providing clients with access to a secure online portal where they can view all case documents and correspondence, allowing them to self-serve information. Option B. Continue current practices, as the primary focus is on meeting legal deadlines, and client communication can be addressed reactively when specific client inquiries arise. Option C. Schedule brief, informal phone calls with clients only when a significant case event has occurred, to avoid overwhelming them with unnecessary details. Option D. Implement a standardized weekly email update for all active clients, summarizing key case activities, upcoming milestones, and any potential challenges, with a clear instruction for clients to direct further questions to the supervising attorney. The correct answer is D. Implement a standardized weekly email update for all active clients, summarizing key case activities, upcoming milestones, and any potential challenges, with a clear instruction for clients to direct further questions to the supervising attorney. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a paralegal to balance the firm's efficiency with the client's fundamental right to be informed and to have their expectations managed accurately. Failing to do so can lead to client dissatisfaction, potential malpractice claims, and damage to the firm's reputation. The paralegal must navigate the complexities of client communication, file organization, and the ethical obligations owed to clients under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct, which govern paralegal conduct when supervised by an attorney. The correct approach involves proactively and transparently communicating with the client about the case's progress, potential delays, and realistic outcomes. This aligns with the ethical duty of communication and diligence. Specifically, Texas Disciplinary Rule of Professional Conduct 1.03 communication mandates that a lawyer, and by extension, paralegal acting under their supervision, shall keep a client reasonably informed about the status of a matter and promptly comply with reasonable requests for information. Managing client expectations involves setting realistic timelines and outcomes, avoiding overpromising, and clearly explaining the legal process and any potential challenges. Maintaining organized and up-to-date client files is crucial for efficient case management, accurate communication, and compliance with record-keeping requirements, ensuring that all relevant information is readily accessible to the supervising attorney. An incorrect approach that involves delaying updates until a significant development occurs fails to meet the duty of keeping the client reasonably informed. This can lead to the client feeling neglected or uninformed, eroding trust. Another incorrect approach, such as providing overly optimistic or speculative updates without clear factual or legal basis, constitutes misrepresentation and can lead to the client making decisions based on false premises, violating the duty of candor and honesty. Finally, an approach that prioritizes speed over accuracy in client file management, leading to incomplete or disorganized records, hinders the supervising attorney's ability to provide effective representation and can result in missed deadlines or overlooked critical information, violating the duty of diligence. Professionals should approach client management by establishing clear communication protocols from the outset of representation. This includes setting expectations regarding the frequency and method of updates, and the paralegal should regularly review case progress against established timelines, proactively identifying potential issues or delays. When communicating with clients, paralegals must be truthful, avoid jargon, and ensure the client understands the information provided. File management should be a continuous process, with regular updates and organization to ensure all documents and communications are properly logged and accessible. This systematic approach, grounded in ethical obligations and best practices, ensures both client satisfaction and effective legal representation. Question 13. Benchmark analysis indicates that paralegals play a crucial role in identifying potential issues that could lead to legal malpractice claims. A certified paralegal working on a complex litigation matter notices a pattern of missed deadlines for filing critical discovery responses, despite clear instructions from the supervising attorney to prioritize these filings. The paralegal has repeatedly reminded the attorney of the upcoming deadlines, but the attorney has not taken action. The paralegal is concerned that these omissions could significantly prejudice the client's case. What is the most appropriate course of action for the paralegal in this situation? Strictly adhering to the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, Paralegal Certification Framework. Option A. Document the missed deadlines and the paralegal's reminders factually and report these observations directly to the supervising attorney for their attention and action. Option B. Ignore the missed deadlines, assuming the supervising attorney is aware and has a strategic reason for the delay, and continue with other assigned tasks. Option C. Immediately inform the client that the attorney is likely committing malpractice and advise them to seek new counsel. Option D. Discuss the attorney's inaction and potential malpractice with other paralegals in the firm to gauge their opinions and seek advice on how to proceed. The correct answer is C. Immediately inform the client that the attorney is likely committing malpractice and advise them to seek new counsel. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a paralegal to identify potential legal malpractice without overstepping their authorized role or providing unauthorized legal advice. The paralegal must recognize the subtle indicators of potential negligence and understand the appropriate internal procedures for reporting such concerns, all while maintaining client confidentiality and avoiding any action that could be construed as practicing law. The TBLS certification emphasizes the paralegal's role as a support professional, not an attorney, making the distinction between identifying a potential issue and resolving it critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves recognizing the attorney's potential error, documenting observations factually, and promptly reporting these observations to the supervising attorney. This aligns with the TBLS framework for paralegal conduct, which mandates reporting ethical concerns or potential professional misconduct to the supervising attorney. This approach respects the attorney-client relationship, upholds the paralegal's duty of diligence and competence within their scope, and ensures that the supervising attorney is aware of and can address any potential malpractice issues. It is the paralegal's responsibility to bring potential problems to the attorney's attention, allowing the attorney to take appropriate action. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to directly advise the client that the attorney may have committed malpractice. This constitutes the unauthorized practice of law, a serious ethical violation for paralegals. It bypasses the supervising attorney, undermines the attorney-client relationship, and could expose the client to further harm or misdirection. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the observed discrepancy, assuming it is a minor oversight or not the paralegal's concern. This fails to uphold the paralegal's duty of diligence and competence. By not reporting a potential issue that could harm the client or the firm, the paralegal risks contributing to or enabling malpractice, which is contrary to the ethical obligations expected of a certified paralegal. A third incorrect approach is to discuss the potential malpractice with other paralegals or staff members without the supervising attorney's knowledge or consent. This violates client confidentiality and could create a hostile work environment or spread misinformation, potentially damaging the firm's reputation and the attorney-client relationship. The proper channel for addressing such concerns is always through the supervising attorney. Professional reasoning. Paralegals must develop a keen observational sense for potential issues that could lead to malpractice claims. When such issues arise, the decision-making process should involve 1. Objectively identifying the factual discrepancy or potential error. 2. Assessing whether this discrepancy falls within the scope of their duties to report to the supervising attorney. 3. Documenting observations clearly and factually. 4. Promptly and discreetly communicating these observations to the supervising attorney. 5. Refraining from offering legal opinions or advice to the client or engaging in discussions outside of the authorized reporting structure. This systematic approach ensures ethical compliance, protects the client and supports the supervising attorney in fulfilling their professional responsibilities. Question 14. The review process indicates that a paralegal is assisting an attorney with trial preparation for a complex civil litigation matter in Texas. The paralegal has been tasked with organizing all exhibits and preparing key fact witnesses for their depositions and potential trial testimony. The attorney has provided a preliminary list of exhibits and a general outline of the desired trial narrative. The paralegal is considering several approaches to fulfill these responsibilities. Which approach best aligns with TBLS certification standards for trial preparation? Option A. Independently determine the most impactful order for presenting exhibits at trial based on personal judgment, and provide witnesses with a simplified summary of their testimony, omitting any potentially confusing details. Option B. Systematically organize all exhibits by exhibit number. Create a detailed index cross-referencing exhibit numbers with their descriptions and relevance to key issues, and under attorney supervision, meet with witnesses to review their prior deposition testimony, relevant documents, and discuss the general scope of their expected testimony, ensuring they understand the importance of truthful and accurate answers. Option C. Rely on the attorney to identify and retrieve exhibits during trial, while the paralegal focuses solely on scheduling witness depositions and ensuring witnesses are aware of the deposition dates. Option D. Create a detailed narrative script for each witness to memorize, outlining precisely what they should say during their testimony, and organize exhibits in a manner that best supports this predetermined narrative, even if it means de-emphasizing certain unfavorable documents. The correct answer is B. Systematically organize all exhibits by exhibit number. Create a detailed index cross-referencing exhibit numbers with their descriptions and relevance to key issues, and under attorney supervision, meet with witnesses to review their prior deposition testimony, relevant documents, and discuss the general scope of their expected testimony, ensuring they understand the importance of truthful and accurate answers. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal must balance the attorney's instructions with the ethical and procedural requirements of trial preparation, specifically concerning exhibit organization and witness preparation. The paralegal's role is to support the attorney effectively while upholding the integrity of the legal process and adhering to TBLS standards for paralegal certification. Careful judgment is required to ensure all exhibits are properly identified, organized, and accessible, and that witnesses are prepared ethically and effectively, without crossing the line into unauthorized practice of law. The correct approach involves meticulously organizing exhibits according to court rules and the attorney's trial strategy, ensuring each exhibit is properly marked, indexed, and readily available. This includes understanding the specific requirements of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and local court rules regarding exhibit handling. Witness preparation, under the direct supervision of the attorney, should focus on reviewing documents, clarifying testimony based on discovery responses, and ensuring the witness understands the process, without suggesting specific answers or coaching the witness on how to testify. This aligns with the TBLS certification's emphasis on competence and adherence to ethical guidelines for paralegals assisting in trial preparation. An incorrect approach that involves creating a narrative for a witness to memorize would be ethically problematic. This constitutes witness coaching and potentially suborning perjury, which is a severe ethical violation and could lead to disciplinary action against both the paralegal and the attorney. It undermines the truth-seeking function of the court. Another incorrect approach, failing to organize exhibits systematically and instead relying on the attorney to locate them during trial, demonstrates a lack of diligence and competence, falling short of the professional standards expected of a certified paralegal. This inefficiency can prejudice the client's case and reflects poorly on the legal team. A third incorrect approach, independently deciding which exhibits are most crucial without attorney input and presenting them in a potentially misleading order, oversteps the paralegal's authority and can disrupt the attorney's carefully crafted trial strategy, demonstrating a failure to follow instructions and a lack of understanding of the attorney-client relationship within the trial context. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes clear communication with the supervising attorney, a thorough understanding of applicable Texas procedural rules, and a commitment to ethical conduct. When faced with instructions that seem ethically questionable or procedurally unsound, the paralegal must seek clarification from the attorney, and if necessary, raise concerns about potential ethical violations or procedural missteps, always acting within the bounds of their delegated authority and TBLS standards. Question 15. System analysis indicates that a paralegal reviewing documents for a client in Texas has encountered a draft agreement for the sale of a small business. The client claims they felt pressured into signing and that the buyer misrepresented the business's financial health. The paralegal notes that the agreement appears to contain all the standard elements of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration, but also observes that the client's stated concerns, if proven, could potentially relate to defenses such as duress or fraudulent inducement. The paralegal's duty is to assist the supervising attorney. Which of the following actions best reflects the paralegal's professional responsibility in this situation? Adhering strictly to TBLS certification guidelines for paralegals in Texas. Option A. Advise the client that the contract is likely unenforceable due to the pressure and misrepresentation, and suggest they refuse to proceed. Option B. Inform the client that their concerns are not legally relevant to contract formation and that they are bound by the agreement as written. Option C. Draft a legal memorandum for the supervising attorney outlining the elements of duress and fraudulent inducement and analyzing how the client's statements might fit these legal doctrines, concluding with a recommendation on the contract's enforceability. Option D. Present the draft agreement to the supervising attorney, highlighting the client's stated concerns about pressure and financial misrepresentation, and noting that these facts may raise issues related to contract defenses like duress or fraudulent inducement, without offering a legal opinion on enforceability. The correct answer is A. Advise the client that the contract is likely unenforceable due to the pressure and misrepresentation, and suggest they refuse to proceed. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the paralegal to exercise independent judgment regarding the enforceability of a contract and potential defenses, while operating strictly within the scope of their authorized duties under Texas law and TBLS certification guidelines. The paralegal must avoid providing legal advice, which is reserved for licensed attorneys. The core of the challenge lies in identifying and articulating potential legal issues without crossing the line into legal advocacy or opinion. The correct approach involves accurately identifying the elements of contract formation and potential defenses as they appear in the provided documents, and then presenting these observations neutrally to the supervising attorney. This aligns with TBLS guidelines that emphasize paralegals' role in assisting attorneys by gathering and organizing information, identifying factual and legal issues, and preparing documents under attorney supervision. Specifically, the paralegal's duty is to report findings, not to determine legal outcomes or advise clients. This approach respects the attorney-client relationship and the paralegal's ethical boundaries. An incorrect approach would be to definitively state that the contract is unenforceable or that a specific defense is valid. This constitutes providing legal advice and usurping the attorney's role, a direct violation of ethical rules governing paralegals and the scope of TBLS certification. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore potential issues and simply present the documents without highlighting any contractual concerns. This fails to fulfill the paralegal's duty to assist the attorney in identifying potential legal problems, potentially prejudicing the client's case. Finally, an approach that attempts to draft a legal argument or strategy for the client or attorney would also be incorrect, as this is the exclusive domain of licensed legal counsel. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a clear understanding of the paralegal's role as a support professional. The paralegal should first identify factual patterns that may implicate legal principles. Then they must consult their knowledge of relevant legal concepts like offer, acceptance, consideration, capacity, legality, and common defenses such as duress or misrepresentation, as they apply to the facts. The final step is to communicate these observations and potential issues to the supervising attorney in a clear, concise, and objective manner, allowing the attorney to then provide legal advice and develop strategy. Question 16. Assessment of a paralegal's process for verifying and utilizing common legal abbreviations in a Texas civil litigation pleading, considering the need for absolute accuracy and adherence to professional standards. Option A. Employing abbreviations based on personal familiarity and the perceived likelihood that the reader will understand them. Option B. Using abbreviations that are frequently seen in personal research materials without confirming their formal acceptance or specific meaning in the context of Texas practice. Option C. Relying on the abbreviation's common usage in informal legal discussions and assuming its meaning is universally understood. Option D. Consulting a reputable legal dictionary, and if the abbreviation is specific to a particular court or practice area, cross-referencing with the relevant Texas rules of civil procedure or local court rules. The correct answer is D. Consulting a reputable legal dictionary, and if the abbreviation is specific to a particular court or practice area, cross-referencing with the relevant Texas rules of civil procedure or local court rules. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge for paralegals, ensuring accuracy and clarity in legal documents, particularly when dealing with abbreviations. Misinterpreting or misusing legal abbreviations can lead to significant errors in pleadings, contracts, or other legal instruments, potentially impacting case outcomes and client interests. The Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, paralegal certification emphasizes the importance of a paralegal's ability to understand and apply legal terminology accurately, which includes abbreviations. Professionalism demands meticulous attention to detail and a commitment to avoiding ambiguity. The correct approach involves a systematic and verifiable method for understanding and using legal abbreviations. This entails consulting authoritative sources and, when in doubt, seeking clarification. For a paralegal certified by the TBLS, adherence to established professional standards and the rules governing legal practice in Texas is paramount. This includes understanding that while common abbreviations exist, their usage must be clear and unambiguous to avoid misinterpretation by courts, opposing counsel, or clients. The TBLS certification implies a commitment to maintaining a high level of competence, which includes the accurate use of legal language. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on personal memory or informal understanding of abbreviations. This is professionally risky because memory can be fallible, and informal understandings may not align with established legal conventions or may be context-dependent. Such an approach fails to meet the standard of care expected of a certified paralegal and could lead to errors that violate ethical obligations to the client and the court. Another incorrect approach is to assume an abbreviation is universally understood without verification. Legal language is precise, and assumptions can lead to misinterpretations, creating confusion or misrepresentation within legal documents. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the professional standards required by the TBLS. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a proactive and diligent approach to legal terminology. When encountering an unfamiliar abbreviation, or when there is any doubt about the meaning or appropriateness of an abbreviation, a paralegal should consult reliable legal dictionaries, practice guides specific to Texas law, or the rules of procedure governing the relevant court. If clarification is still needed, the paralegal should consult with the supervising attorney. This systematic verification process ensures accuracy, promotes clarity, and upholds the ethical duty of competence and diligence. Question 17. Upon reviewing a draft of a motion for summary judgment prepared for filing in a Texas district court, a paralegal notices a minor grammatical error in the introductory paragraph and a slight deviation from the standard font size specified in the court's local rules for the signature block. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates adherence to the TBLS paralegal certification's emphasis on drafting legal documents within the Texas regulatory framework? Option A. Immediately flag both the grammatical error and the font size deviation for the attorney's review, requesting clarification on how to proceed with correcting both according to the Texas rules of civil procedure and local court rules. Option B. Prioritize correcting the grammatical error to ensure clarity and conciseness, and then address the font size deviation if time permits before submitting to the attorney. Option C. Correct the grammatical error using a standard legal writing style guide and adjust the font size in the signature block to a commonly accepted size, assuming compliance with court rules. Option D. Focus on ensuring the legal arguments and factual assertions within the motion are sound, as these are the most critical components, and consider the grammatical and formatting issues secondary. The correct answer is B. Prioritize correcting the grammatical error to ensure clarity and conciseness, and then address the font size deviation if time permits before submitting to the attorney. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a paralegal must ensure that all legal documents drafted for filing with Texas state courts adhere strictly to the Texas rules of civil procedure and any relevant local rules. The paralegal's responsibility extends beyond mere grammatical correctness to ensuring the document's substance and form comply with procedural requirements, which directly impacts the client's case. A failure to do so can lead to sanctions, dismissal of claims, or other adverse consequences for the client, reflecting poorly on the attorney and the paralegal's competence. The correct approach involves meticulously reviewing the drafted document against the specific requirements of the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and any applicable local rules of the court where the document will be filed. This includes verifying correct formatting, proper citation of authority, accurate pleading of facts, and adherence to any specific pleading requirements outlined in the rules. For instance, Rule 101 of the Texas Disciplinary Rules of Professional Conduct, while governing attorney conduct, implicitly requires paralegals to operate under attorney supervision and to produce work that meets professional standards, which includes procedural compliance. The TBLS Paralegal Certification exam emphasizes practical application of legal principles, and this includes understanding and applying procedural rules in document drafting. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on grammatical accuracy without verifying compliance with the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure is professionally deficient. This oversight fails to address the substantive legal requirements of the document, potentially rendering it invalid or subject to dismissal. Such an approach neglects the paralegal's duty to assist the attorney in ensuring all filings are procedurally sound, a core aspect of competent legal support. Another incorrect approach, which is to rely on a generic legal writing style guide without cross-referencing the specific Texas Rules of Civil Procedure, is also unacceptable. While general style guides promote clarity and conciseness, they do not substitute for the mandatory procedural requirements mandated by the Texas courts. Failing to consult and apply these specific rules constitutes a failure to meet the professional standard of care expected of a certified paralegal. A further incorrect approach, such as assuming that a previous filing in a similar case will serve as a perfect template without independent verification against current rules, is risky. Rules can be amended, and local court practices may vary. This reliance on outdated or assumed compliance can lead to significant procedural errors. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic checklist approach. First, identify the specific court and the type of document being drafted. Second, consult the relevant Texas Rules of Civil Procedure and any applicable local rules. Third, draft the document, paying close attention to both substantive legal content and procedural requirements. Fourth, conduct a thorough review, comparing the draft against the rules and seeking attorney review before filing. This methodical process ensures that all legal and procedural obligations are met, safeguarding the client's interests and upholding professional standards. Question 18. The evaluation methodology shows that a paralegal working on a complex felony case has been asked by a junior associate attorney to independently research and draft a motion to suppress evidence based on the paralegal's own interpretation of the initial police report and arrest affidavit. Paralegal has significant experience with this type of motion, but has not yet received specific instructions from the lead attorney on the strategy for this particular case. What is the most appropriate course of action for the paralegal? Option A. Proceed with drafting the motion to suppress, assuming the junior associate attorney's request implies attorney approval for the strategy. Option B. Delay drafting the motion until the lead attorney provides explicit instruction, even if it means missing a potential filing deadline. Option C. Inform the junior associate attorney that drafting the motion is outside the paralegal's scope of duties, and that such a task requires attorney direction and supervision. Option D. Research the relevant Texas Rules of Criminal Procedure and case law, draft the motion to suppress, and submit it to the junior associate attorney for review. The correct answer is D. Research the relevant Texas Rules of Criminal Procedure and case law, draft the motion to suppress, and submit it to the junior associate attorney for review. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a paralegal's role in the criminal justice system requires a thorough understanding of procedural steps and the ethical boundaries governing their actions. This scenario is professionally challenging because the paralegal is being asked to perform a task that encroaches upon the attorney's exclusive purview, specifically the strategic decision-making regarding pretrial motions. A paralegal's duty is to assist the attorney, not to independently determine legal strategy. The correct approach involves the paralegal recognizing the limitation of their role and promptly communicating the request to the supervising attorney. This aligns with the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, TBLS, paralegal certification standards, which emphasize the importance of maintaining professional boundaries and ensuring that all legal work is supervised by an attorney. The paralegal's responsibility is to gather information, organize documents, and perform tasks as directed by the attorney, but not to make independent legal judgments or recommendations on substantive legal strategy. This approach upholds the attorney-client privilege and ensures that the client receives advice and representation from a licensed attorney. An incorrect approach would be for the paralegal to attempt to draft the motion themselves without attorney input. This is a failure to adhere to the TBLS guidelines regarding the unauthorized practice of law and the requirement for attorney supervision. It could lead to the filing of a procedurally or substantively deficient motion, harming the client's case and potentially exposing the paralegal and the firm to disciplinary action. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the request, which would be a failure to perform assigned duties and could also negatively impact the client's case by delaying necessary legal action. The professional reasoning process for paralegals in such situations should involve a clear understanding of their scope of practice as defined by TBLS and the supervising attorney's instructions. When faced with a request that seems to exceed these boundaries, the paralegal should pause, assess the nature of the request against their defined role, and err on the side of caution by seeking clarification and guidance from the supervising attorney. This proactive communication ensures that legal work is performed ethically and competently, protecting both the client and the paralegal. Question 19. Performance analysis shows that a paralegal is assisting an attorney in preparing for a mediation in a complex commercial dispute. The paralegal has gathered all relevant financial documents, organized key correspondence, and drafted a summary of the client's position based on attorney and client discussions. During a pre-mediation meeting, the client expresses significant anxiety about directly negotiating and asks the paralegal for advice on what concessions they should be willing to make. The paralegal's supervising attorney is currently unavailable due to an emergency. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the paralegal? Option A. Advise the client on potential settlement ranges and specific concessions based on the paralegal's understanding of the case and common mediation outcomes, while emphasizing that these are suggestions. Option B. Suggest that the client directly communicate their anxieties to the mediator, who can then guide them on appropriate concessions. Option C. Proceed to contact the opposing counsel to gauge their willingness to make concessions based on the paralegal's assessment of the client's bottom line. Option D. Inform the client that the paralegal cannot provide legal advice or settlement recommendations, but can review the client's proposed concessions with the attorney once the attorney is available, and can help the client organize their thoughts for discussion with the attorney. The correct answer is A. Advise the client on potential settlement ranges and specific concessions based on the paralegal's understanding of the case and common mediation outcomes, while emphasizing that these are suggestions. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a paralegal to navigate the ethical boundaries of representing a client's interests while also adhering to the principles of alternative dispute resolution, ADR, specifically mediation, within the Texas legal framework. The paralegal must understand that while zealous advocacy is crucial, it must be balanced with the cooperative and good faith spirit inherent in mediation, as governed by Texas law and ethical guidelines for paralegals. The paralegal's role is to support the attorney and client, not to unilaterally dictate the terms of settlement or engage in conduct that undermines the mediation process. The correct approach involves the paralegal diligently preparing the client and attorney for mediation by gathering necessary information, organizing documents, and understanding the client's objectives, all while respecting the mediator's role and the confidential nature of mediation proceedings, as outlined by Texas Civil Practice and Remedies Code, Chapter 154. The paralegal's duty is to facilitate the attorney's and client's informed participation in the mediation, ensuring they understand the process and their rights, without exceeding their authorized scope of practice or engaging in conduct that could be construed as misrepresentation or undue influence. This approach upholds the paralegal's ethical obligations to the client and the integrity of the ADR process. An incorrect approach that involves the paralegal attempting to directly negotiate settlement terms with the opposing party or their counsel without the attorney's explicit instruction and supervision is ethically problematic. This could be construed as the unauthorized practice of law, a violation of Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct, and a breach of the paralegal's duty to act under attorney supervision. Another incorrect approach, such as advising the client on the legal merits of their case or suggesting specific settlement figures without attorney input, also constitutes the unauthorized practice of law and violates ethical guidelines. Furthermore, failing to adequately prepare the client or attorney for the mediation, or misrepresenting the mediation process, undermines the client's ability to make informed decisions and erodes trust in the legal system. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding the scope of their authority as a paralegal under Texas law and ethical rules. This involves constant communication with the supervising attorney, clarifying roles and responsibilities, and ensuring all actions are taken with attorney knowledge and approval. When faced with situations involving ADR, paralegals must be acutely aware of the specific rules and principles governing those processes in Texas, and always act in a manner that supports the attorney-client relationship and the integrity of the legal proceedings. Question 20. Implementation of a paralegal's duties in a Texas law firm requires careful consideration of attorney-client privilege. A client, while discussing their ongoing litigation with their supervising attorney, makes a brief, seemingly unrelated comment about a personal financial concern that they mention was a contributing factor to their current legal predicament. Later, another attorney in the same firm, who is not involved in the client's case, asks the paralegal for details about this personal financial comment, stating it might be relevant to another matter they are handling. What is the paralegal's ethically and legally required course of action regarding the client's comment? Option A. Disclose the client's comment to the inquiring attorney, as the comment was made by the client and not directly to the paralegal, thus not covered by the privilege. Option B. Inform the client that their comment was overheard and ask for permission to share it with the other attorney, as this is the most transparent approach. Option C. Disclose the client's comment to the inquiring attorney, as all attorneys within the firm are bound by confidentiality and can share information for the benefit of the firm's clients. Option D. Refuse to disclose the client's comment to the inquiring attorney and consult with the supervising attorney about the request, without revealing the content of the comment to the inquiring attorney. The correct answer is C. Disclose the client's comment to the inquiring attorney, as all attorneys within the firm are bound by confidentiality and can share information for the benefit of the firm's clients. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in legal practice, balancing the need for information gathering with the paramount duty to protect client confidences under the attorney-client privilege. The paralegal must exercise careful judgment to avoid inadvertently waiving this privilege, which could have severe detrimental consequences for the client and the law firm. The attorney-client privilege, as understood within the Texas legal framework and ethical rules governing paralegals, is designed to encourage open and honest communication between clients and their attorneys. The correct approach involves recognizing that the communication, even if seemingly innocuous or tangential to the core legal matter, falls within the scope of the attorney-client privilege because it was made by the client to the attorney or their representative, like a paralegal, for the purpose of obtaining legal advice. The paralegal's role is to facilitate this communication and protect its confidentiality. Therefore, refusing to disclose the content of the communication to a third party, even a colleague in the firm not directly involved in the case, is the appropriate action. This aligns with the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct, specifically Rule 1.05, which broadly defines confidential information and prohibits its disclosure without client consent. Paralegals are bound by these ethical obligations, either directly or through the supervising attorney's responsibility. An incorrect approach would be to assume that because the third party is also an attorney within the same firm, the privilege does not apply or can be waived. This overlooks the fact that attorney-client privilege is about the communication itself and the purpose for which it was made, not solely about the identity of the recipient within the firm. Disclosure to an attorney not working on the case, without the client's informed consent, can constitute a waiver of the privilege. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the information based on a perceived need to know by the colleague, without first consulting the supervising attorney or obtaining client consent. This bypasses the established protocols for handling privileged information and risks unauthorized disclosure. Finally, assuming the communication is not privileged because it doesn't directly relate to a specific legal question is also a failure. The privilege extends to communications made in anticipation of or during the course of seeking legal advice, which can encompass broader discussions about the client's situation. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a clear understanding of the attorney-client privilege and its exception. When in doubt, the paralegal should err on the side of caution and consult with the supervising attorney. The paralegal should always consider the source of the information, the client, the recipient, the attorney or their representative, and the purpose of the communication, seeking legal advice. If a third party requests information that may be privileged, the paralegal must assess whether disclosure is authorized by the client or falls within a recognized exception to the privilege, and if not, refuse disclosure and seek guidance from the attorney.